The alarm rang at 5:56 a.m., but Daniel Reed didn't need it to wake up. His body was already on high alert before his eyes even opened. A weight pressed against his chest, a mix of restlessness and tension that seemed to radiate through every muscle. His mind, like a raging river, refused to slow down. To-do lists, past arguments, decisions left hanging, all hammering incessantly. He rose slowly, trying to soften the impact of the routine waiting for him. Each step felt heavy, as if the floor were glued to his feet. The kitchen was cold, the coffee maker still off, but it wasn't hunger or the lack of caffeine that bothered him. It was that feeling that, at any moment, he could erupt emotionally, as if every minor frustration were fuel for an internal fire. Looking out the window, the city began to stir. People crossing streets, cars passing by, everyday sounds that should have been normal, but to Daniel they felt distant, almost unreal. He felt disconnected, like he was watching someone else's life unfold, unable to engage in his own routine without being swept up by the emotional whirlwind inside him. A small argument from last night with a coworker crept into his thoughts. An ironic comment, a misunderstood gesture, and he had reacted with anger, intensifying the tension. The memory of heat on his face and trembling hands made his stomach knot. It wasn't just anger, it was shame, frustration with himself, the sense of repeating the same patterns. Each uncontrolled emotional episode left invisible scars, marks that Daniel carried silently. He walked to the living room, passing the dining table strewn with bills. A sigh escaped his lips. How can something so small make me feel so out of control? He wondered. It wasn't the bills or the overdue emails, it was his emotional reaction to each minor obstacle. Every moment of irritation, fear, or anxiety had the power to distort his entire day. Daniel realized it wasn't just about external events, it was his mind reacting automatically, unpredictably, taking over before he could intervene. He sat on the couch and closed his eyes. He tried to breathe slowly, but his heart kept racing. Thoughts of missed opportunities surfaced. Conversations that could have been constructive, moments with friends or family that ended in frustration, professional decisions compromised by impulsiveness. It was a pattern that repeated itself, silent but relentless. And then something shifted. Between one breath and the next, Daniel realized the first step wasn't to eliminate emotion, it was to accept it. To acknowledge that every feeling was real, but he didn't have to be its prisoner. That tiny awareness, almost imperceptible, sparked a glimmer of hope. For the first time, he felt he could interrupt the cycle before the emotion completely consumed him. The sun began to light up the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. Daniel stood, resolute, with a silent decision. No longer would he let emotional chaos dictate his day. There was still work to be done. Breathing techniques, methods to pause before reacting, lessons to face each trigger, but something fundamental had changed. He had recognized the problem, and that was the beginning of transformation. The storm inside him still roared, but now there was awareness, a clear intention. Every small gesture, every conscious choice, was a step toward mastery over his own emotions. Daniel took another deep breath, feeling the weight of his decision. Today he would start mastering his emotions before they mastered him. By 6:45 a.m., Daniel Moore had parked in front of the office. Another sleepless night weighed heavily on him, reflected in his eyes. On the outside he looked the same as always, polite, discreet, efficient. But inside, an invisible storm churned through every thought, every feeling. Over the past months, Daniel realized his emotional instability didn't appear out of nowhere. Minor frustrations, unexpected remarks, work surprises, everything felt magnified, and he found himself reacting excessively, unable to control his responses. Anger rose quickly, anxiety swelled, and the sense of being at the mercy of his own emotions became painfully real. At the office he tried to mask it, but small mistakes started appearing. Missed deadlines, interrupted meetings, curt responses to colleagues. Linda Harper, his longtime friend and confidant, noticed immediately. "Daniel, can I be honest?" she asked after a tense meeting. "Of course," he replied, trying to stay calm. "You're here but not present. Your body is in the room but your mind seems elsewhere." She paused, looking him in the eyes. "Your emotions are taking over." Her words echoed in Daniel's mind all day. Your emotions are taking over. On the way home, the heavy traffic seemed to mirror the chaos inside him. Every honk, every quickly changing light, every distracted pedestrian triggered an automatic reaction of impatience or irritation. Finally, at the Charles River, the cold cut across his face, and the sound of flowing water was the only thing calming his restless mind. There he found Ethan Moore, an older man with gray hair and a serene smile, sitting on a bench reading a book. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" Ethan said without looking up. "Yes," Daniel replied hesitantly. "I come here when I can't think straight. Or maybe when you think too much," Ethan smiled. "I've been where you are, confusing thinking with living." For nearly an hour, Daniel listened as Ethan shared his life experience. Emotions are like wild horses. If you don't hold the reins, they drag you along. Before they parted, Ethan handed Daniel a small card with a handwritten line. "Watch your emotions like clouds. They pass but you remain." That night, Daniel returned home with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in weeks. Not because his emotions had vanished, but because he finally understood that control wasn't about suppressing them, it was about recognizing, observing, and choosing his response. The next morning, while making coffee, he wrote in his notebook, "Controlling emotions doesn't mean repressing them, it means not letting them dictate my actions." In the following days, Daniel began tracking his emotions daily, creating what he called his emotional map. At first, his notes were chaotic. Anger, anxiety, frustration, small victories, all jumbled without order. Gradually, though, patterns emerged, bringing a sense of control. Understanding his own reactions began to open the way for more conscious choices. For a brief time, Daniel believed he was improving. He slept more, focused better at work, and even received praise from colleagues. But, as often happens with those emotionally overextended, the calm brought an unexpected challenge. On a gray Friday, he was called into a meeting with the CFO. The topic: company cuts. Among the potential names affected, his own. As he listened, his mind raced. What if I lose my job? How will I pay the bills? What if I have to move? The old internal monologue surged with full force, unfiltered. His heart raced, breathing quickened, hands trembled. Each thought intensified his anxiety and sense of helplessness. Arriving home, Daniel felt the weight of it all. Years trying to control his emotions, only to realize he was still being carried away by them. Looking in the mirror, he murmured, "I can't even control my own feelings. Who am I fooling?" Then he remembered Ethan's words, "Watch your emotions like clouds." But at that moment there were no clouds, only a storm within. He sat on the floor, breathing deeply, feeling every heartbeat. His mind seemed to suffocate him. Then his phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "Daniel?" The mentor's voice was calm but firm. "You need to get out of there now." Confused but obedient, Daniel got up, dressed, and stepped outside. The drizzle hit his face, the cold wind woke him. At the Charles River, Ethan waited, shielded by a black umbrella. "I knew you'd come," Ethan said. "The mind is predictable when it panics." "I thought I was doing better, but it all came back," Daniel said, voice trembling. "It didn't come back," Ethan replied. "You just tried to silence something that didn't need silencing. The secret isn't shutting it down, it's listening without losing yourself." Ethan placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder and instructed, "Close your eyes." Daniel obeyed. "Now tell me what you feel." "The rain, the river, the distant traffic." "And inside you?" Silence. Then Daniel whispered, "Fear. Fear of losing everything." Ethan nodded. "Fear isn't your enemy. just wants to be heard. You kept it locked up so long it had to shout. The word struck Daniel deeply. He cried not out of sadness but relief. For the first time, he realized that observing his emotions was more powerful than trying to control them. When the tears stopped, a different calm settled over him. Not the absence of emotion but the presence of awareness. Ethan spoke softly, "You spent your life thinking controlling the mind meant fighting it. Control isn't a war. It's a partnership." "Partnership?" Daniel asked. "Yes. Accept what you feel but don't let it dominate you. See the chaos but stay whole within it." Daniel opened his eyes. The rain fell but he felt light. His emotions were still there, but he had finally learned to observe them without being swept away. What Daniel is about to discover will forever change how he handles his own emotions. If you've ever felt controlled by your feelings, keep following, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. Profido. Aqui esta a tragiqueo completa dos capítulos 4 e 5, mantendo o mesmo estilo natural, envolvent e culturalmente adaptado para o inglês americano. The following weeks brought a sense of transition for Daniel. He was no longer the man who reacted to everything. He still felt fear, anger, anxiety, but now there was a distance between feeling and acting. It was as if, for the first time, he had found the switch separating impulse from awareness. Yet, fate seemed determined to test what he had learned. One Monday morning, Daniel was called back into the director's office. Same scene, same cold, bureaucratic tone. This time there was no speculation. The decision was final. He was being let go. Daniel's heart raced, but he stayed silent for a few moments, taking a deep breath. The director explained the reasons: reduced budget, new targets. Daniel listened carefully. In another time he would have argued, grown angry, or accused them of unfairness. But this time he simply replied, calm and steady, "I understand. Thank you for the opportunity." The director looked at him, surprised, expecting an explosive reaction that never came. As he left the building, Daniel walked through the streets of Boston, feeling the cold sting his face, but also a strange inner peace. Unemployment was real, uncertainty was high, but for the first time he didn't feel crushed by despair. He made his way to the Charles River, the same place where he had met Ethan weeks before. The old man was already there, sitting on the same bench, book open, warm coffee in hand. "I knew you'd come," Ethan said without taking his eyes off the river. "I got fired," Daniel replied with a faint smile. "And how does that feel?" "Strangely good," Daniel let out a short laugh. "I think I finally understand what you meant. It's not about controlling what happens, it's about controlling what happens inside me." Ethan closed the book and looked at him with pride. "Exactly. The world won't stop testing you, Daniel. But now you have the power to choose your response." They sat in silence for a while, watching the water. Daniel reflected on everything that had changed, not the circumstances but himself. The mind that once tortured him with uncontrollable thoughts was now an ally. That night, back in his apartment, Daniel sat in front of the mirror. He looked at his own reflection, the same tired face, the same marks of time, but something different shone in his eyes: serenity. He opened his notebook and wrote, "Today I lost a job, but I gained something greater: control over my mind. Not over the world, not over others, over myself. And maybe that's true power." He closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and allowed a smile to escape. Life hadn't become easier, but now he knew he could weather any storm, because calm came from within. Ethan's voice echoed in his memory, a final lesson: he who masters his emotions, masters his destiny. Months passed since that cold morning by the Charles River. Boston moved at its usual relentless pace, but Daniel had found his own rhythm. Each step, each breath, each thought felt lighter, more conscious. At work, new opportunities arose, not because the world had changed but because he had. Every meeting, every decision, every conversation was now handled with clarity and presence. He no longer reacted automatically, he chose his responses wisely. At home, life had transformed as well. Conversations with his daughter became open and sincere. He no longer needed to suppress emotions or fear expressing them. A simple gesture of affection, a well-chosen word, built invisible bridges between him and those he loved. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Daniel ran into Ethan again. The old man smiled upon seeing him. "You've changed, Daniel." "There are still tough days, but..." Daniel took a deep breath. "I've learned to observe my thoughts without letting them control me." Ethan nodded, satisfied. The mind is like a river, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm. The key isn't stopping it, it's learning to navigate the currents. Daniel smiled, watching the water. Every challenge, every anxiety, every fear was now just another flow to understand, not a prison. That night, alone in his apartment, he wrote in his notebook, "I don't control everything happening around me, but I control my mind. I can't stop thoughts from coming, but I can choose which ones to follow. True freedom isn't in silencing the mind, it's in mastering my response to it." He closed the notebook and looked at his reflection. The same face, but different. Someone who had learned that strength isn't in fighting thoughts, but in guiding them consciously. The phone rang. A friend was calling to discuss a project. Daniel smiled, answered, and spoke with calm, attention, and empathy. Every word measured, every pause intentional. Later, before sleeping, he lay down, closed his eyes, and let his mind wander, without fear, without rush, just observing. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. The city slept outside, but inside him there was silence. Not the absence of thought, but the silence of full awareness. He didn't need to control everything. He just needed to be present. And with that understanding, Daniel Reed finally felt free. He who masters his mind, masters his life. Peace doesn't come when thoughts stop. It comes